You already know about the Red Scare. You have heard about McCarthyism, about the witch hunts, about the lists of names, about the careers destroyed and the lives ruined in the name of rooting out communists from American institutions. But there is a chapter of that same era that your history teacher never told you about. Because while America was hunting communists, it was simultaneously hunting another group entirely. A group that had nothing to do with communism. A group whose only crime was existing. The United States government looked its own employees in the eye and told them that being gay made them a threat to national security, that their sexuality made them weak, blackmailable, dangerous, unfit to serve their country. And then it fired them. Not one or two of them, not a handful, 5,000 people, at minimum. Many historians believe the real number is far higher. 5,000 Americans lost their jobs, their careers, their reputations, and in many cases, their will to live, not because of anything they had done, not because of any crime they had committed, not because of any threat they had posed, but because of who they were. They were gay. And in the United States of America, in the middle of the 20th century, that was enough. This is not a story about ancient Rome. This is not a story about medieval Europe or Nazi Germany. This is a story about America, about a democracy, about a government that stood in front of the world and called itself the land of the free, while systematically destroying the lives of its own gay citizens behind closed doors. If you have never heard of the Lavender Scare, that is not an accident. It was buried deliberately, and tonight we are digging it back up. If you are not subscribed to this channel yet, do it right now. Turn on notifications, because every single week we bring you the history that was hidden from you on purpose. The stories that powerful people decided you were better off not knowing. Subscribe now and make sure you never miss one. This is the Lavender Scare, and it is one of the darkest chapters in American history that almost nobody talks about. To understand the Lavender Scare, you have to understand the atmosphere of America in the late 1940s and early 1950s. The Second World War had just ended. America had emerged as the most powerful nation on Earth. But almost immediately, a new threat appeared on the horizon: the Soviet Union, communism, the Cold War. Fear gripped the country in a way that is difficult to fully appreciate today. Americans genuinely believed that communist spies had infiltrated their government, their military, their universities, their neighborhoods. Senator Joseph McCarthy stood up and told the country that there were communists hiding everywhere. And a terrified nation believed him. The Red Scare was born. Congressional hearings, FBI investigations, blacklists, thousands of Americans accused of communist sympathies, dragged before committees, forced to name names, fired from their jobs, destroyed publicly and professionally. It was one of the ugliest periods in American political history. But while all of that was happening publicly and loudly, something else was happening quietly, something that would not be fully exposed for decades. Inside the United States government, a parallel hunt was being organized, not for communists, for gay people. It began in February 1950, just weeks after McCarthy made his famous speech about communists in the State Department. A State Department official named John Purifoy was testifying before a Senate subcommittee. During his testimony, he let slip a piece of information that would set everything in motion. He mentioned that among the employees recently dismissed from the State Department for security reasons, a significant number had been removed not for communist sympathies, but for what he described as moral perversion. The senators immediately understood what that meant. The hearing erupted. Suddenly, the investigation into communists in the State Department had a second front. A new enemy had been identified: gay employees. Within weeks, a full Senate subcommittee investigation had been launched. Its official title was Employment of Homosexuals and Other Sex Perverts in Government. Read that title again. employment of homosexuals and other sex perverts in government. That was an official United States Senate document, printed on government letterhead, distributed to members of Congress, filed in the National Archives. The United States Senate sat down, deliberated, and produced a formal document that described gay Americans as sex perverts and recommended their systematic removal from federal employment. And then it got worse. The report, released in December 1950, made 3 central arguments for why gay employees had to be fired. The first argument was moral. Gay people were described as having low moral standards and being inherently unsuitable for positions of public trust. The second argument was psychological. The report claimed, without any credible scientific basis, that homosexuals were emotionally unstable, prone to poor judgment, and unfit for the responsibilities of government service. The third argument was the one that would prove most powerful and most enduring. Gay employees, the report argued, were uniquely vulnerable to blackmail by foreign agents. The reasoning went like this: because homosexuality was illegal and socially stigmatized, a gay government employee would do anything to keep their sexuality secret. If a Soviet spy discovered that an American official was gay, that spy could threaten to expose them unless they handed over classified information. Therefore, the report concluded, every gay employee in the federal government was a potential security risk regardless of their actual conduct, their loyalty, or their record of service. It was a trap with no exit. Being gay made you a blackmail risk. Being a blackmail risk made you a security threat. Being a security threat meant you had to be fired. And if you tried to keep your sexuality secret to protect yourself, that secrecy itself was used as evidence that you were hiding something dangerous. There was no way to win. There was no way out. The machinery of the United States government had been pointed directly at its own gay citizens. And it was about to start moving. If you are still watching, please like this video right now. Every like pushes this history towards someone who needs to hear it. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. This channel does not let stories like this stay buried. What followed the 1950 report was a purge. There is no other word for it. President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed Executive Order 10,450 in 1953, which formally made sexual perversion grounds for dismissal from federal employment. With the stroke of a pen, the hunting of gay government employees became official United States policy. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, who was himself rumored throughout his life to have been gay, threw itself into the investigation with remarkable enthusiasm. Agents were assigned specifically to identify gay federal employees. They surveilled known gay bars and gathering places. They followed people. They photographed them. They built files. Those files were then used to call employees into offices where they were confronted with what had been discovered about them and given a simple choice: resign quietly or be fired publicly. Most resigned because a quiet resignation, while devastating, at least offered some possibility of rebuilding a life elsewhere. A public firing for sexual perversion meant your name in the newspapers, your family finding out, your community knowing, your future employment anywhere in any professional field essentially impossible. People lost everything. Career diplomats who had served their country for decades, military officers with distinguished records, scientists, administrators, clerks, people at every level of government service, in every department, across every agency. And it was not limited to the federal government. Once Washington set the tone, state and local governments followed. Private companies with government contracts followed. Universities followed. The logic of the Lavender Scare spread outward from Washington like a slow poison through the entire professional landscape of America. Being identified as gay did not just cost you your government job. It could cost you every job, everywhere, for the rest of your life. Now let us talk about the people behind the numbers, because 5,000 is a number, and numbers are easy to process without feeling their weight. So let us make it human. His name was Lester Hunt. Lester Hunt was a United States Senator from Wyoming, a Democrat, a man who had served his state with distinction and who was, by all accounts, a decent and principled public servant. His son, Lester Hunt Jr., was arrested in 1953 in Washington on a charge related to soliciting another man. Republican senators who wanted Hunt's Senate seat found out about the arrest, and they used it. They went to Senator Hunt and delivered a message that was not subtle. If he did not withdraw from his re-election campaign and resign from the Senate, they would make his son's arrest public. They would destroy his son. They would destroy his family. Lester Hunt did not withdraw. He tried to hold on. He tried to fight. On June 19, 1954, Lester Hunt went to his Senate office. He sat down at his desk, and he shot himself. He left no note that has ever been made public. But the circumstances of his death, the blackmail, the pressure, the threat to his son, were known to his colleagues and were discussed in private, even as they were carefully kept out of the public record. A United States senator was driven to suicide by his own colleagues, using his son's homosexuality as a weapon. That is the Lavender Scare, not as policy, not as statistics, but as a father sitting alone in his office making the decision that there was no way forward. Then there was Frank Kameny. Frank Kameny was an astronomer. He had a PhD from Harvard. He had served in the United States Army. He was hired by the Army Map Service in 1957 to do exactly the kind of careful, precise scientific work that his training had prepared him for. 8 months into his job, he was called in and told that the government had learned he was gay. He was fired. Frank Kameny did something that almost no one in his position had ever done before. He fought back. He appealed his dismissal through every available channel. He wrote letters, he filed complaints. He took his case all the way to the United States Supreme Court, which refused to hear it. And then, instead of giving up, Frank Kameny became one of the founding figures of the American gay rights movement. In 1961, he co-founded the Mattachine Society of Washington, one of the earliest gay rights organizations in the country. He organized pickets outside the White House, the State Department, and the Pentagon. He challenged the American Psychiatric Association's classification of homosexuality as a mental disorder, a classification that the APA would not remove until 1973. He spent the rest of his life fighting for the rights of gay Americans with a fury and a precision that came directly from what had been done to him. In 2009, the United States Office of Personnel Management formally apologized to Frank Kameny for his dismissal more than 50 years earlier. He accepted the apology. He was gracious about it, but he also made clear that an apology 50 years later, while welcome, could not give back what had been taken, could not restore the career, could not return the years, could not undo the damage done to the thousands of people who had not survived the purge the way he had. Frank Kameny died in 2011 at the age of 86. He had lived long enough to see gay marriage become legal in Washington, D.C. He had lived long enough to receive his apology. Many of the people destroyed alongside him had not lived that long. The Lavender Scare did not end quickly. Executive Order 10,450, the order that made being gay grounds for dismissal from federal employment, was not fully rescinded until 1995, when many of the people reading this were already alive. For 42 years, the official policy of the United States government was that gay people were security risks unfit for federal employment. 42 years. And even after the executive order was rescinded, the culture it had created did not disappear overnight. The suspicion, the surveillance, the sense that gay employees had to hide who they were to protect their careers. That culture persisted in various forms for years after the official policy had changed. The full number of people affected by the Lavender Scare will never be known. The 5,000 figure comes from documented dismissals from federal employment alone. It does not count the people who resigned before they could be fired. It does not count the people who were pushed out of private sector jobs as a result of the whiter culture the purge created. It does not count the people who died. It does not count Lester Hunt. It does not count the people who left Washington and went somewhere no one knew them and spent the rest of their lives making sure no one ever found out who they really were. Their names are gone. Their stories are gone. The damage done to their lives is gone with them. But we know it happened, and we refuse to pretend otherwise. America has never fully reckoned with the Lavender Scare. The Red Scare, McCarthyism, the Hollywood blacklist, these things are taught in schools. They are in textbooks. They are acknowledged as shameful chapters in American history that the country has moved on from and learned from. The Lavender Scare is not in most textbooks. It is not acknowledged in most histories of the period. It is a footnote at best and invisible at worst. The people who were destroyed by it have largely not received the apologies and acknowledgments that the victims of McCarthyism received. Their stories have not been told with the same seriousness and the same weight. And that silence is itself a form of the original injustice. Because to refuse to acknowledge what was done to someone is to continue doing it to them, to erase them again, to tell them once more that their suffering does not count, that their story does not matter, that they are not worthy of the same historical reckoning that other victims of government persecution have received. They are worthy. Every single person who lost their job, their career, their family, their future, their life to the Lavender Scare is worthy of being remembered, of being named, of being acknowledged by the country that destroyed them. They were not security risks. They were not moral perverts. They were not threats to the nation. They were Americans who wanted to serve their country and live their lives and be left alone. And America hunted them. History forgot them. We will not. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this history. Leave a comment below telling me what you think about what America did to its own people. Like this video so YouTube keeps showing it to people who deserve to know the truth. Every week on this channel, we find the stories that were buried on purpose, the names that were erased deliberately, the truths that powerful people decided you were better off not knowing. We find them, we tell them, and we make sure they are never forgotten again. We will see you next week.